Hi everybody and welcome to part 2 of the A to Z of property strategies with David Clouter. I'm Andrew Roberts from the Great Property Meet, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel The Great Property Meet, like this video if you like it, and hit the bell icon if you want to hear the previous video, and obviously look at the channel itself for video 1 if you missed that. Or in the top corner, we'll be putting a copy of video 1 and a link to it up there for you so that you can go back to the start and watch the box set of the A to Z of property strategies. Now, David, last time we were on the A's and we finished with asset stripping.
And that's why I haven't got my jacket today.
Ah, brilliant.
It's gone.
So, are we still on the A's or have we moved on?
Oh, no, there are a lot of these. And
okay, carry on then. Tell me what the A's are.
The next one we're going to do is attic conversion.
Okay,
and
I've done this. I've done a few of them, actually.
So have I. And do you know, in some parts of the country, particularly central London,
Southeast, yeah,
and the southeast, it's such a big deal that they will come along with a big lorry and a crane and crane all this into place. But your property does have to be at a certain value for that to be worthwhile.
And if we actually wind this forward, it's a different strategy again, but there is talk of air rights coming in the future. So it's a strategy A that I don't think we've actually got on our list because it's not currently a strategy, but land banking your deals to either do an attic conversion or build upwards, adding what is proposed an extra 2 floors onto your existing building without the need for planning permission.
Which is fantastic.
Superb. But let's get back to attic conversions before I take you off down a rabbit hole, because I know you go down them rabbit holes.
I almost wanted to talk about the one time, just before the credit crunch, when I saw in central London, this is a bit of an aside, but anyway, it was a property that had, they'd sold the rights to build a basement under this property, even before planning had been obtained or anything, and they'd sold this for a 6-figure sum. But that's not. But I digress.
Nice one.
But that only works when the market is really
skyrocketing
and a bit silly.
So, talk to me about attic converting. Is this something that's a passive strategy, an active strategy? Do you have to own it? Could you do this on somebody else's property? I mean, tell me, David.
Well, I don't know if it was somebody else's property and if they were happy for you to do that and you were going to foot the bill, quite possibly, but there wouldn't be much benefit for you because you'd have spent 40 grand or 50 grand and passed over the value to the owners. I think we'd probably, from our point of view, like to own that strategy, although if you were to come to me and you wanted to put an attic on one of mine, the answer is yes.
Totally.
So yes, we need to.
You can give me a free attic as well anytime. That's a great strategy. Free attic conversions.
Absolutely. So there are some planning issues, as you alluded to, especially if you're in for example, a conservation area. And we'll come back to that later. But you know, they probably want you to be just below the ridge of the roof with your things sticking out at the back and that kind of stuff, and so forth. But in many areas where they've just sort of whacked up rows and rows of houses and nobody cares, things might be a bit less precise on that. But effectively, you're adding square feet or square meters to your property. Quite a cost-effective way. To go down with basements is much more expensive. And again, sometimes people go down 2 stories.
If we can take this back to the attic.
Yes, absolutely. Back up.
I'm going to challenge you on what you've just said. It's a really cost-effective way of adding square footage to your property. Now, building materials cost the same across the whole of the UK. Broadly speaking. Probably 20p a metre for your timber, if at that difference between London and Newcastle. The builder costs broadly the same across the UK. Therefore, if it costs, and I've typically paid anywhere between 8 and 30k for attic conversions, depending on the size, complexity, whether you're straightening hips to gables and so forth. I would say in the north of England, per square pound of square footage, often you find that the money you spend on doing the conversion equals the cost that you've uplifted the value by. Whereas if you went to the southeast, the pound you spend grows by £5 for every pound you spend. So it's
Yes.
A geographic strategy.
You're absolutely right. And probably with carpenters and with timber, you're absolutely right about costs. With other things, this is another strategy for later on. If you're buying kitchens, you can buy them somewhere quite remote in the Hebrides or something, ship them down to London or whatever, and there'll be a huge markup to be made. Even if it's a national supplier, you can negotiate, and that'll be coming to that at the letter N. But you can get, I've had a 40% reduction in costs, even including the cost of the lorries and stuff. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But in terms of an attic, spot on.
Yeah. So it's a low risk strategy because you already own the building. It's the cost of a planning permission you either uplift or you don't. It's quite high reward depending on your geographic location,
yes.
is what I would caveat that with.
I absolutely agree. It may be that what you spent on an attic conversion, you could invest that money and buy another house.
Correct.
And then there would be just no need to do this at all.
But if you were buying another house and it was in the south of England, the cost of the deposit, the stamp duty could negate the benefit of doing that. Whereas in the north of England, you might go, well, the stamp duty and the deposit are nothing. I might as well buy the house. Yeah. And then I've got two. And then if government strategy of creating jobs in the north happens, it pushes asset prices up in the north. Therefore, it might become economically viable to do in the north. So you've land banked attics. Yes, effectively.
Which is a great idea. I've never owned north of a certain line, you see. So, but I'm about to start doing so because the numbers make much more sense, which will come into another of these
another
videos.
Strategy.
So that is something that I'll have to moving forward. But all the properties that I've ever owned, it's been very cost effective because they're down there.
Yeah.
To add those attics, which I've done with great enthusiasm over the years.
Yeah. So this isn't a north versus south. We don't like north. We love south, or anything of that nature. It's looking at the financial economics of that strategy. So let's move on. Auctions.
Yes. Oh yes. Now,
do we have auctions as strategy? Because it's an A. Come on, we've got to have auctions.
We have, and there are three things that I can think of to do with auctions. I mean,
three auction strategies. Boom, loving that.
Well, even actually. Let's do a fourth one, which is the stuff we see on that TV program under the something or other, and where you're just bidding off the floor, and that's something that's quite worth knowing. And one of the things that you need to know about that, I've attended auctions, but they're far too scary for me to bid off the floor, so I tend to use the other three strategies. But since we're in the room and talking about this, and the bidding is going frantically, there's a few things that it's probably quite important to know about bidding on the day, apart from the fact that obviously you're going to have to put that 10% or whatever down straight away, and then you're going to get the 28 days to come up with the rest and so on.
Can I stop you there? If it's commercial and the property is VAT registered, they actually give you 60 days. And that's to allow you to actually fill a form in with HMRC, get them to engross it, stamp it, and send it back to you so you don't pay the VAT on the property. That's a little aside. Let's go back to auctions.
That's a fabulously useful one for anybody buying commercial at auction. I should say that I'm a contrarian. So many people go to auctions looking for rundown, decrepit properties.
Yeah.
And the nice, pristine ones, where there might not even be anything wrong with the title, tend to get overlooked. So in terms of bargains, the people who watch that TV show are always going to be going for the distressed ones. If you find a nice property, you might be the only person bidding for it in the whole room, because people will think that's not a bargain. And the distressed ones, often because of the volume of interest and the fact that people don't know how to use spreadsheets and can't run their numbers, they get very excited and they bid this much for one that's worth that much.
Yeah, so I describe those, politely speaking, as grunters. Really ugly properties, but
I thought you meant the bidders.
But what I see there, I mean, there's a whole strategy around this, and we might cover this in a separate video series altogether, the auction side of things, is people will often overbid because they'll go, nah, I can get a bit more for that. So they will push what they're bidding on in the room up. In addition to that, what they will also do is underestimate the costs of doing the work, which enables them to bid that little bit more. And furthermore, they'll sit there and underestimate their own time on the project, because if it's a builder, sometimes they will bid lower than their cost that they would sell out at, because they want to win that deal to keep their builders busy because they've got no work on at that time. So they're buying the building for work for themselves. So there's a couple of sub-strategies within that there.
Absolutely,
that I've digressed into, David.
No, that's
so
okay. This
jump
is
back on
the
track.
third separate video series that we're going to have to do, because auctions is a whole can of worms or whatever you call it. And another thing that you need to know about auctions if you're bidding off the floor is that there is a reserve price.
Yeah.
Back in the good old or different old days, in the wild west of auctions, you could have a guide price of £1 and a reserve price of £1 million. And fortunately, that's no longer the case.
You have to be now within the tolerance limit, and
10%.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say, just remind me.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm happy to do so. And so if you're 10%, so you kind of know really that the reserve, and I think you know it's going to be 10%.
They will always make it 10%
for practical purposes.
Yeah.
So now up to the reserve. The auctioneer is allowed to, what should we say, to accept bids from off the wall or off the chandelier, as we say, very often a phone bid. You can end up in your enthusiasm bidding against yourself, which is
that's not a great strategy, that. So you're going to actually bid against yourself to pay more money for something that you could pay less money for because you're naive and didn't actually realise the auctioneer was playing you.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's naughty. But he can only do that up to,
but not including the reserve. And so that is something that's kind of very important to know.
Observe the room and make sure it's real people who you can see putting their hand up in the room.
It might be quite hard for you to see them if you're in the front, in which case you'd have a friend who's kind of a bit nearer to the front who can give you a wink if the auctioneer appears to be fabricating. It's more difficult nowadays because you get bids coming in online, you get phone bids. It's hard to know whether they're kind of real or not really. But there are some, what should we say, maverick property sellers who will go into the auction room and either bid on their properties up to the reserve, or sometimes I've known cases where two friends go in together and they bid on each other's. And I know one case where this chap actually bid slightly over the reserve on his friend's property, but luckily the bidding carried on because that would have been rather unfortunate.
It could have been embarrassing.
Over the reserve, you've got to buy. There's a contract there, so it's kind of a little something that's important to be aware of in that sense.
It almost sounds like, and this is a different strategy again, like those people were trying to underwrite their own deals, but auction underwriting is another investment strategy altogether.
Absolutely.
And we'll do a detailed strategy on that one.
Yes, I think auction underwriting and all those more sophisticated auction techniques deserve a whole video on their own, because we need to talk about this kind of thing for about half an hour. But that's a very good one to flag up. So we've got 258 property strategies now.
So I keep adding them to you. Sorry, David.
Assuming we haven't bought something off the floor with all that entails, there are two other times to buy at auction, and one is after the hammer's gone down. And that's my favourite time, because then the whole balance of power switches from the auctioneer and the seller to you. It doesn't particularly matter if this £100,000 property had say that was the reserve, and it had a bid of 99,500 and didn't quite meet the reserve, so it didn't sell at auction. That's irrelevant when you come back after the auction, because you can advance the quite plausible scenario that the person who made that bill may well have bought the next lot. And anyway, where are they now? So at that point...
Well, that is a very good point, because if they are not back there talking to the auctioneer post, you've lost the buyer.
Yeah, it may be they just got a bit carried away.
Yeah, often in auctions we do see that. We've all bid on an item on eBay for £1.
We have.
And ended up overpaying.
We have.
Because it's mine. I'm having that one.
It's a pity there's no software like for eBay. There's a software called sniping, which enables you to put in a bid a millisecond before the auction closes. But don't tell anyone, because they'll all be doing it. So post-auction, you can rewrite the rules. You can say, well, forget the 28-day thing, and I'm going to give you 5% deposit, and for that £100,000 reserve, I'm going to pay you 80. Look, take it or leave it. I've got the cash. Here it is. And you know, there are deals to be done.
And the control shifts to you.
Yes,
so it's
yes,
very
yes.
good, very good.
At the end of the day, it's in everybody's interest to see things sell, and so there are deals that can be done.
So we've talked about buying in the room. We've talked about issues of buying in the room. We've talked about buying after the auction.
There's one
Can you
more
buy
time.
them before auction?
Funnily enough, you can. It's funny you should mention that.
Okay. Let's go for this strategy
The
then.
balance is still with the seller and the auction house at this point, but it might be something you really, really want. You might be building up a portfolio of properties in a particular area. There might be one, the jewel in the crown, the nugget, and if you can agree a price with the vendor and with the auction house that it's acceptable for them to let it go at, then that property may well be yours. And one of the normal preconditions is that you should have exchanged contracts before the day of the auction and paid your deposit. And this kind of thing. So you've still got the need
So
to
you're under a
move
little bit of
fast.
time pressure.
You are.
Based on when auction lots tend to get published and when the auction date is. So you need a pretty damn good solicitor.
Absolutely. And when the law packs come out, which is usually about 2 or 3 days before and then sometimes they dribble out a bit at a time, so that's something to be aware of. But, it's very much a case of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. There are, and I'm going to tell you, this is a little ninja tip, and when we do our longer series, I'll tell you the actual details of it, but there are websites which track properties that have been offered at auction and haven't sold or have resold, and you can see a property that's been through the auction process 10 times in the last year, so you know there's kind of something wrong with it. And
there's a history.
That's right. So it's very, very useful to subscribe to these kind of things. That's a very, very helpful. They're very helpful tools and resources.
Perfect. Auctions. I mean,
we're not done.
We've done about pre-auction. We've done about during the auction. We've done about post-auction. We've done about underwriting. Surely that's auctions done.
We mentioned underwriting without really saying what it is, but we will cover that in detail in our series, because that would take us on about a quarter of an hour, and we haven't got the time in this video. There's one more thing, the auction flip, which is quite a useful strategy to do.
So how do flips work?
And flips we'll be dealing with in more detail when we get to F, obviously.
Yeah.
But an auction...
Sorry, auction flips.
Auction flips work in a very interesting... I mean, you haven't done any of these so far. Do you want to talk about this particular one?
Auction flips, for me, what this is, and this is quite smart, you buy a property in auction A, and the auction might be out of area, or it might be a residential property in a commercial auction, or a commercial property in a residential auction.
Yes, fish out of water.
So it's being marketed to the wrong audience. And where this is brilliant is where you can right size or correct the problem. So you buy effectively in auction A very cheaply, and then you move it to the right auction to maximize the value, flipping it straight back out. So you effectively don't own the property for very long at all, moving it out the door.
You don't, no lick of paint, nothing to repair, nothing to do. You might even go in there, some people go in there and they make them worse. They'll go in there with a hammer and smash a few things. They do that.
Well, I actually know somebody, and their strategy is to get a spray paint gun and walk around and on the floor go, conservatory, ensuite.
Absolutely.
They'll mark on the walls, they'll spray paint on the drive, garage here, marking out what could be a set of plans in 3D on the floor for people. They'll even go so far as to put wooden boards over the windows to make it look like a grunter, like we spoke about earlier, and making the property look trashed so that people overpay thinking they're getting a bargain because it must be a trashed property. How smart is that?
It's brilliant.
And it really does. I've seen it so many times uplift the value very significantly. And I think it's funny. It's what I call a chortle.
I mean, these property trader types, to be honest, they're all the ones who drive Ferraris and that kind of thing, bright cars and sort of and splash the cash. And
I don't have a Ferrari. Do you have a Ferrari?
I've got a very nice push bike. It's a rally.
He does as well.
I bought it second hand, of course.
That's very environmentally friendly. So that's the end of A's, David tells us, and that's the end of our second video in this series. So if you've enjoyed this video, There's a link to this video at the top. By all means, hit the like button if you enjoyed what we've done. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see the other videos, and hit the notification button if you want to be told by YouTube instantly we release the next video. So I'm Andrew Roberts from The Great Property Meet, and I've been with the phenomenal, fantastic, funny David Clouter.
You're very kind, sir. See you on the next video. Look forward to it.